Happy October 1st. I think this clip is probably the first one for the video that will come out probably around the 10th of October. We survived the big rainstorm of yesterday. In this area it didn't really amount to much, but there's a lot of damage in other parts of the province, unfortunately. Bridges washed out, roads washed out, people's houses and basements flooded and all that sort of thing. But really here it wasn't much of a storm at all. Typical rainstorm, really. We had some heavy rain during the day, but by the time it was getting to the worst of the storm in other parts of the province, it was pretty much over with here. Occasional shower during the night, so we were very fortunate. What we're looking at here is my grafted Asian pear tree. Showing it to you for a couple of reasons. This is its second year. I planted it a year ago this past spring. All of a sudden, and I think after those heavy rainstorms that we had a few weeks ago, it put on a lot of new growth. All of that top growth is quite new, which is good. I mean, I'm glad it's getting bigger, but I'm concerned about it doing that this time of year, whether or not it has time enough to harden off so that the new growth will survive the winter, but we won't know that until next spring. And the second reason, I'm going to pick a pear. I want to show you at least pick one of the pears that are on it, so I'll move you in for a closer shot for that. It's a tree that has a remarkable ability to hide the fruit. It was so small I was concerned with it setting too much fruit and the weight breaking down the branches, so I thought I pruned most everything off and left only 2 or 3 pears. Later on I discovered I had 4, and then later on again I discovered there were 7, 3 of which have fallen off on their own. As I said, there's 4 different varieties on that, so perhaps they were ones that ripened earlier. Unfortunately, when they hit the ground, they got attacked by slugs and whatever. One wasn't too bad, so I did manage to cut a piece off and taste it. It was quite good. I think there are now 4 left on there. You can see in here, that's sort of green apple size, I guess. Another one over in there, and there is one back in there that I'm sure you can't see. But the one that I'm going to pick is this one, which has a russet look to it, or the skin sort of like a russet apple or a russet potato. What's the kind of pear that I'm thinking of? Anjou, the type of pear that sort of has that kind of skin. Small for an Asian pear, but then again, this is a small tree, so I assume the tree gets bigger, it will grow larger pears. Also, I did not water this tree at all in this very dry summer, for a very good reason. I watered it last year in its first year so that it would get established, but in the dry summer I didn't want to water it because I wanted it to encourage it to send its roots further down in the ground looking for water, and it survived. It never really had any damage as far as leaf drop or anything, so it was getting moisture enough. But if we'd had a wetter summer, I think the pears also might have been a bit bigger. This is quite solid. I don't know if it's actually ripe or not. I'm going to cut a piece off and try it, but I didn't want it to fall on the ground and get devoured by slugs before I had a chance to taste it. No, that's ripe. It's very nice. Asian pears are sort of crunchy anyway. Very juicy and sweet. This is quite nice. So a lot of those would be really appreciated. Next year, now that the tree's a bit bigger, I will allow it to have a few more, although it had more this year than I wanted it to have, I guess. And I assume everybody understands that an Asian pear is not pear-shaped. You understand it now if you've never seen one before. They're more shaped like an apple. And the pear taste is also a bit different than the Bartlett pear or the Anjou pear. Those are the ones that we normally see in stores, but really quite nice, and I'm excited to see what it might do next year. Well, this is the raised bed that had the onions in it, and that I have planted the cover crop of buckwheat in. As you can see, the buckwheat flourished. Bit knocked down this morning after that heavy rain, but I think perhaps when the sun comes out again tomorrow, I guess it's supposed to be a sunny day tomorrow and for the weekend, it will probably stand back up. But you can see the plant cam back there in the far corner. It has been taking, I think, 5 or 6 photographs a day in the midday, starting at noon and going through till something like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, one photograph every 15 minutes or something like that. And I plan to leave it set up and continuing to take its pictures until the frost kills this, and I think it'll probably just collapse when the frost kills it. Probably not showing up. It is starting to bloom, just tiny little white blossoms on the top of some of it, but I'm not too convinced that it will have a chance to produce seeds and become a problem. If it does, I'll cut it down, but I think the frost will take it long before it produces any mature seeds. Well, I have been picking beans, as you can see. I get that basket down in there or not. I had that basket full the first time, and it's less than half full this time. These are the, I'll speak again after I stop making all this noise. These are the mooch beans, M-E-U-C-H. David sent me from Switzerland. I have eaten them fresh as a pole bean. I have canned them, and I left all of these on the vine so that I could have some for shelling. I'm throwing them on the floor. I'll have to pick those out in a minute. So that I have some for shelling, both to eat as a cooked bean after you shell them, and for next year's seed. In one of my videos, I asked people to try to identify these things for me if they could, because when I Google mooch beans, I don't get anything. So I assume that is the local name that they were called in the area of Switzerland where David lived. And I had several people reply, and I would check out each name that they gave me. I would Google it to get photographs of it more than anything else. And there was always some reason why it didn't, wasn't the same as what I'm growing. Difference in color, difference in something or other. And so I eliminated most of them. And then I think it was a lady. I'll have to check and put your name up here. I can't remember the name. I'm out in the cabin, by the way. I just put paper on the table out here, and I'm going to dry them. Suggested rattlesnake beans. And I thought, what is the chance of something called a rattlesnake bean coming back to North America from Switzerland? Well, I Googled, and they look identical to this. Not only the bean itself, there was a few of these that were dry, so I shelled them out already, but the bean seeds look the same to me as the rattlesnake bean. So the only way to prove it for certain, I guess, would be to do DNA testing. But I'm going to call them rattlesnake beans from now on, and whatever they are, I really like them. They're an excellent bean to eat, and I've canned them. I will be shelling these, but they're much easier to shell once the pods have dried. They just crack open and you can shell them easily. So I'm not using the cabin for anything too exciting in the next couple of weeks, so I'll leave them spread out here and let them dry. I had to pick them now. We haven't had a hard frost yet, or killing frost, but we've had a couple of light frosts, so a hard frost probably isn't that far away, and I didn't want them to be damaged by the frost, so I've harvested them and brought them in. It was time to bring in the grapes. I think that's just about, well, I don't know, 95% anyway of my grapes off that one vine. The variety is Beta. I left some of the smaller clusters. Not that any of these clusters are huge, but there are some that were very small. That's probably one of the better clusters there. They're a small grape. As I said, the variety is called Beta, and that is not a Concord grape, but is in the same classification as a Concord grape. It's what they call a slipskin grape. Last year I made grape jelly, and it came out beautifully. It gelled nicely. It's a beautiful color. One small problem, to me it has absolutely no grape flavor, and this is a year later. It hasn't changed any or matured within the year. So I've been looking online and looking at the packets of Certo, the pectin that I use, the instructions that come with them. I found 2 recipes for grape jam, and I don't think I've ever seen grape jam on a store shelf anywhere. Anyway, what you do to make it is each grape has to be, with these little grapes it's going to be a tedious job, but each grape you sort of make a cut and squeeze it and the insides come out. You save the peelings, all of them, off to one side, and you cut them up, either dice them up or in a food processor, if that would work. I don't know. Depending on how many you get, I guess. And the inside you cook, and then you put it through a strainer to remove the seeds. I'll probably use my French kitchen mill thing that I've used in other videos. And then you combine the two and carry on with the process. There's two recipes that I found. One's called a spiced grape jam, and one is a plain baked grape jam. So I probably have enough here to make a batch of each of them, but I will try one of them, and if it works I may carry on and do the second kind. I won't add that to this video. I will do that separately, and only if it works will I post it. There's not much sense in putting up a long recipe on how to make grape jam that didn't work. So anyway, you'll see that in a week or two if it actually worked. And boy, do these things ever have seeds. Okay, that one not so bad, only had 3. But I've eaten some that have 4 or 5 seeds in each one of those little. So there will be lots of seeds to remove. And something else I want to show you now is my entire hazelnut harvest 3. Unless there's some hidden on the tree somewhere that I don't see. This is the first time it's ever produced anything, and as I've said in one of my other videos, it's because it needed cross-pollination. For the first time, the tree next to the one that produced these had a few male catkins on it this spring, so it must have managed to pollinate. They're usually wind pollinated. The blossom is almost microscopic, it's so small, but the pollen comes on the wind from a neighboring tree, a different variety evidently, and it produced 3 hazelnuts for me, unless I say when the leaves fall off I find some more. Earlier in the summer when I was looking at the thing, I thought I found 5 or 6 places where there were nuts formed, but either I was wrong or something got them, or they're still hidden amongst the leaves. But I'll let these continue to age and enjoy my 3 hazelnuts. Well, this is Canadian Thanksgiving weekend coming up. I think at the beginning of this series of clips I said that these videos would probably be out on the 10th of October. Well, it's now going to be the 17th, I think, when this comes out, because some other things got in the way and came out first. Anyway, I'm invited to my brother's for Thanksgiving dinner on Sunday, and I thought I would like to take with me a few things out of the garden. One of the things that I thought would be useful would be some potatoes. I have 2 pots of Norland, the red-skinned potato. So I think I will open both of those. Both of these pots had 4 seed potatoes in it, and I'm finding the pots that I had 3 or 4 seed potatoes in, I'm getting less of a yield than I got with the varieties that just had the 1 seed potato. Soil is very wet after that heavy rainstorm that we had, which did a lot of damage in other areas of the province. Roads washed out, bridges washed out, people's houses flooded and destroyed, all that kind of horrible thing. But very fortunate here, the storm seemed to take a different course shortly after it got started here, and we didn't have too bad of a storm at all. Sort of more a typical fall rainstorm, really. It appears to be it. And the curious thing this time is I'm not finding the seed potatoes, unless I've got them here in this pile. I don't think I do. They look like decent spuds, a few that there are of them anyway. I'll put them in separate bags and weigh them separately. Put the weight like I do on the bottom of the screen here. weigh them at the house on the kitchen scales. That's not a lot of potatoes anyway. Whatever it weighs isn't much. I think this is the one that had that potato berry thing on the stem. It appears to be it right there. Again, the soil is very wet. These will have to be washed before I take them anywhere, I guess. Normally I don't wash my own potatoes, so I wash them just before I use them type thing. It makes them last longer, according to what I've read anyway. They're not as apt to spoil. These will probably be consumed quite quickly, so I'll wash them before I take them anywhere. Small ones this time. And again, I didn't really find the seed potato. Very curious. Seed potato in this variety must just rot away, I guess. And I think that's it. As I say, I will put the weight on the screen. To close this video off, I'm showing what an Amarosa fingerling potato looks like after it's cooked, for several reasons. One, somebody asked me to because the write-up on them says that they retain their color when they're cooked, and I will cut those in two and show you that. But these have been steamed, and that's what happens. The skin breaks like that when they've been steamed. If you boil them, you end up with a saucepan full of mush. They're what Brendan would call a floury potato. I have baked them, and well, the skin might split, but it's not as bad as that. Although I forgot to pierce them once, and I had one explode, but that was my fault. Any potato will do that if it's not pierced before you put it in the oven. So here's what they look like, the color when they have been cooked. I guess I would call that sort of a purplish color. But they do retain their color. They're a nice, tasty potato. I'm not so sure that I'll grow them again. I'm trying to decide which of the varieties. I'm growing 12 varieties this year because of a mistake that I made when I ordered my seedlings. Seed potatoes, rather. But anyway, I'm trying to decide which ones that I will grow. I don't think I would grow these again just because of the difficulty in cooking them. They have a nice flavor. And also I have this thing about a potato is not supposed to be purple or red. That's beside the point. However, I will definitely order the Linzer Delicatessen, the other fingerling that I did a few weeks ago here in a video. Those are excellent. I plan to order quite a few of them. And the Rocco potatoes. Lovely uniform size and a really good yield I had from one seed potato. And they are supposed to store quite well. So my plans are to order enough of those to plant in the bed where I have the buckwheat growing right now, where the onions were growing, enough to plant that bed full of potatoes and try to store them for use next winter. Anyway, that's all of that explained, I guess. Thank you very much for watching, and that will conclude this video.